In the year of our Lord 1088, the greater French realm was divided into three factions. The young Marie Antoinette of the north under Regency, Duke Kenneth Clermont of the south, and a character we are going to talk about today, Louis Capet of the west. You may be asking, why is France divided? Well, noble shenanigans, I guess. So, what did these three have to offer? Antoinette and her council wanted a unified French realm under a matriarchy and an early form of liberalism. Clermont wanted to unify the French realm under stable leadership, portraying himself as a servant of the people. Capet? Yeah, he didn't really had a plan to unify the realm, which makes him an even more interesting character. While both the north and the south bicker, Capet and the western part of France were having their own funny little adventures. Capet was a Grand Admiral of the French Navy at the time. He had looked to the sea since birth, with his father being a wealthy merchant and his mother being a cook. Early historians believe that Louis wanted the French throne for money and prestige, but later historical records show that Louis ascended to his position by mistake. A message was lost in translation which held a report to Capet that Paris has fallen into civil war. So when a second letter arrived claiming that Capet was to lead the French navy to Bordeaux, he assumed nothing of it and brought all sailors and ships to the southern capital. So imagine his shock when the nobles around the coast proclaimed him the new king of France. It might be because he was known as the Grand Admiral of the Navy at the time, or it was because he held all of France's naval vessels, but we may never know because most of the records were burned during the plunder of Bordeaux. So, what did Capet do in his tenure as king of Western France? Well, in truth, he had really bad luck once he was pushed into his position. His vessels were raided by Venetian pirates, he got scammed by the Byzantine emperor, his newly bought port city in England was not profitable, and his breaking point was when a random Viking warband plundered Bordeaux twice and on the same day. He went insane, became chaste, declared himself the new heir to Rome, went to war with half of Europe, got banished to Corsica, and opened a portal to hell, ruining the world for decades to come. Yeah, not the best way to crash out. But things could have gone differently. He had an alliance with Castile, he had the blessing of the Pope, he had contacts with Muslim rulers and merchants, and he got the full support of his people by introducing reforms to labor and being able to form what I can only describe as the first ever form of unionization. He was a very good domestic ruler, all things considered, which is why his people fought with him to the end. He had an eye for trade and can be considered the merchant king of France. So, what can we change to make him not go insane? Well, to start, I can say there is one event that truly made him break, and that is the plundering of his capital by the Vikings. This statement cannot emphasize how drastically this event broke him. His navy was tricked and burnt, he was captured and tortured, and Bordeaux was put to the torch. So, let's say the Vikings got lost at sea. How could this one event significantly change Capet and the world? Domestically speaking, nothing much would change. He would continue to push out monetary reforms and more domestic and trade policies, uplifting the populace and maybe being able to form a middle class of citizens. Militarily, he would mostly focus on the navy, which might bite him in the back later, but for now, his navy improves, with the army mostly having the same composition as it is. Internationally, geopolitics as we know it could have drastically changed. Let's start with the Iberian Peninsula. The King of Castile and Capet were very close friends, which could make a permanent alliance between the two to form. But we must look southwards to the Caliph of Cordoba. He and Capet were also very close, but in a sense that they were both tolerable to each other as trading partners. And before Capet went crazy, there were talks of an alliance forming to open up more trade from the Muslims in North Africa and the Middle East. This might clash with Castilian ambitions to drive out the Caliphate from Iberia, but for now, there is an uneasy truce mediated by Capet, as the two cannot fight one another without Capet intervening. In the Italian peninsula, things get more interesting. Capet and the Pope in Rome also had a great relationship, with Capet personally giving heavy discounts on his goods to the Papal States. He was ordained as the rightful King of France after Clermont accidentally poisoned the previous Pope with bad cheese. This blessing was taken away once Capet went crazy, so not much in relations needed to be changed with Capet not going insane. So, I can see Capet and the Papal States still being in an alliance together. You may be thinking, damn, how did Capet manage to get these alliances? Well, Capet didn't really care who he was trading with and what the religion or race were. All he cared about was that you were willing to hear him out and have a good trade with him. Now, why were Clermont and Antoinette not also asking for alliances around Europe? Well, they actually did. Clermont and the HRE were in an alliance, a bond through shared agreements, and Clermont aided the Kaiser in defeating rebellions. Antoinette did the same thing, but with Poland. This drove a wedge between Clermont and Antoinette because the Kaiser wanted to attack Poland for Pomerania, and because he had a grudge against the Polish king. This led to many diplomatic skirmishes and proxy wars, which left Capet alone and untouched. Capet never really interacted with the two because he thought it was not worth the effort. But what could really shake up this timeline is the changes made to the English-Antoinette marriage. The King of England and Antoinette were going to become husband and wife, as she had seduced him when she was on a diplomatic mission to England. Louis knew this because he himself had taken an interest in courting the English to support him, but he later dropped fighting over it because, well, he went insane. In this alternate timeline, Capet can enact a very simple plan. You could say he will blockade the English Channel, which he can very much do. No, he planned to threaten the English with excommunication for intervening in French politics. This was before the Anglican Schism, so the prospect of getting excommunicated was not something the English king wanted to think about. Antoinette and her council would get angry, but she had to bite the bullet because Capet was not that much of a major threat in her eyes. Yet, more like a slight annoyance. But all these changes do not fundamentally change the moment we all have been waiting for, the French Unification Wars. This all started when the Kaiser invaded Hungary over a border dispute. Poland was allied with Hungary, so they joined in. Clermont openly supported the Kaiser, and Antoinette, sensing an opportunity, invaded both in a surprise attack. Antoinette may be weaker because she doesn't have England on her side, but she does have the element of surprise. At this time, the two sides quickly realized that Capet held all the cards. He had papal support, he had the naval advantage, and he had the backing of almost everyone in Western Europe, including support from even the Muslims. In canon, he lost all those mentioned to his insanity, but in this alternate timeline, he had it all. A Saint Capet isn't stupid. He is the son of a merchant after all, and he knows how to work people and negotiate like a professional. So, what did each side have to offer him? Antoinette offered him the throne of the Holy Roman Empire, which Capet would have declined. Why? Because he would have had to relinquish his titles and abandon his people for a land he doesn't know much about. During negotiations, the lands Clermont held would have fallen, and he and his loyalists would have led themselves to be exiled to distant lands, where they accidentally landed and settled in what is now known as New France, Florida, in North America. So, the Kaiser gave Capet the best deal yet. The entirety of the French realm plus French majority areas in the HRE. He would, no doubt, accept it. Now, let's look at two different scenarios. One where he would lose, and one where he would stand out victorious. If he lost this war, we would have gone straight back to canon, with Antoinette letting herself be married to the English king later down the line, but Capet would be executed as a pretender and he wouldn't have released the gates of hell onto the earth. But If Capet won, things would have gone more interesting. We would see the entirety of the French realm united and expanded to include French territories in the HRE to make Capet neutral against the Kaiser's war on Eastern Europe. But this singular victory cemented something far greater. This alternate timeline made France the dominant naval power. The French now own a stronghold in the British Isles and can now use their flexible international policy to its fullest. Let me remind you, Capet did not swear a vow of chastity in this timeline, so we could have witnessed a legacy of French naval power projection into the future. This creates alternate ripple effects in Iberia. The hopes of a Reconquista would have been squashed, as Capet would protect the Caliph because of his power projection into the region. The Pope at the time would, in the long term, side with Capet because a larger France would always support the Pope out of gratitude for helping to legitimize Capet. Overall, Capet has done it. He finally got to unite France, but I get the feeling he would want something grander. A sailor would always miss the sea. Maybe he can use his boats to explore distant lands. This might be a stretch, but Capet could have ushered in an early age of exploration. Now, the video ends here. This is my first time ever doing these types of videos. Watch Possible History because he was the one to heavily inspire this video. Thank you for watching.